rises in the deep African desert. It lifts up each sand particle. A sandstorm rises in the deep African desert. It lifts up each sand particle into the air, entranced in a spell. The particles move in unified unison, as though life has been breathed into a large being. With each breath the beast takes, it soars through the air like a mighty sword of glass. As the beast takes the deepest of breaths, its particles unleash, entwining and unraveling in a celebratory dance of life, a seamless dance of wonder. This graceful, mountainous, moving piece of art entrances the eyes. But beware, stepping in to join the dance, for the unsheathed blades will tear your limbs apart. As the night slips away and the darkness crawls back into hiding, fearing the blood-red streaks of sunrise seeping through, the beast takes its last breath and lays to rest, although not for long.
They came from the far north, a caravan of camels and donkeys and children, traveling through the desert and following the twists and turns of the Nile for months, until they found the place they, their children, and their grandchildren would call home, Al-Barkal. Arab nomads that they were, the word home was always relative rather than absolute. They would settle down in the midst of other tribes, taking on their accents, adopting their clothing and their lifestyles, but they would always hold on to their own religious practices and their poetry, keep their daughters and their women indoors, marry only their cousins, and socialize at a bare minimum. Some saw themselves as superior to their indigenous neighbors, while others just preferred to keep to themselves. Some cared only for their own and their family's well-being, while others were born with the compassion and the foresight to see that their and their family's well-being actually lay in the well-being of those around them. The ability to break down cultural and tribal barriers and to give without humiliating is what the people loved about Mahjoub Jaafar. When Nimeri came to visit as president, a popular poet was asked to stand up and say a few words to honor him. He refused, and instead he turned towards the short, bearded man standing next to him and delivered an intimate and beautiful poem, praising the well-loved man who had given so much and asked for nothing in return but good wishes and prayers of acceptance. Every house, every khalwa, every person in that region was touched by him in some way or another, and he was thanked for it in his life and well after he died. And he was only one of many men and women who formed the essence of the Sudanese culture and history, and who would serve as an example of, despite everything, just how much good exists in our world. Allah yarhamak ya Mahjoub Jaafar.
Life is not but a road and a home. Halfa, my home, how the heart aches for you. Spilled tears of generations do not even begin to describe the longing. Where would I have played with the neighbors down the street? When would I have had the first dive in the cool waters of the Nile? Which tree would I have climbed and divulged myself on its fruits? Who would be the first aunt to scold me for climbing trees and swimming late? How would the air taste? What would the sounds feel? Would we, still be feeling this sense of estrangement and deracination? Halfa, my home, is now several miles below the water, forever dormant in a deep blue grave, and we are sentenced for eternal exile. As the water of our drowned home rises, so are we forced to continue ascending the highlands. And as we feel that the winters cannot get any colder, we get proven wrong with our ascent. No heat, no electricity, no hospitals. Death was imminent and suffocating. But the most pain came whenever we looked northwest and saw the lake that was our death sentence. The killer of our world, the indigo catacomb, a permanent reminder as wide and as deep as despair. I should have left. I should have left.
"10 years ago, moving to Sudan brought up appalling Western media images of a country ravaged by war, extreme heat and dust, and primitive in its development. And then came the surprise. After an initial period of settling in, looking for fellow Indians and foods and spices, I learned that the country in which I would spend the next 10 years was very different from the images that were projected of it. I learned of the ancient historical trade ties of spice, gold, and silk between the Meroe kingdom and the Indian traders who used the Red Sea as a shipping route. And I also learned that the Sudanese people were friendly, safe, honest, but slightly laid back. My constant travel companion is my camera and is a record keeper of my times here. I have traveled to Port Sudan, Arkawit, Meroe, Karima, Naga, Bajrawiya, Adbara, Wad Madani, Eddamazin, and Kosti. Social media such as Facebook, blog, Twitter have informed my friends and acquaintances of the many wonders of this land, from the ancient brick pyramids at Karima to the site at Naga, which the UN has declared of great international historical importance because of its antiquity and the influence it had on the Egyptian civilization. Prior to the partition, I had visited Juba too. I will end with an old West African proverb: if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I would like to go far in my journey in Sudan with my friends, and inshallah, as we say here, experience is a strong walking stick. And with that walking stick, I would like to live the rest of my days here.
What never fails to amaze people is that after all of the anguish, After all of the walking through bushes' thorns, after tending to more bullet wounds than she could possibly count, she still had hope. She aimed for the days when she would finally recover, believing that there was actually an end to the agony, and that maybe her long-lost child, peace, would finally come home. There is no denying that it takes courage to keep walking the walk of shame, to keep pulling out the thorns infixed in her, to keep breathing despite the disapproval of her lungs, to keep herself from pulling the trigger she had aimed at her own head. But that courage just isn't enough. The courage to stand up and break the constraints she was tied with hadn't been embedded in her just yet. But she was going to keep walking that boulevard of broken hearts. She was going to keep anticipating the return of their long-lost child. She was going to keep allowing her wounds to heal. For she was powerful, yet tremendously weak. She was trying to hold herself together, but kept falling apart as each day passed. She was clinging on to life so dearly, but her body chose to let go. She was the Sudan. We
know two Sudans.